About 70% of our audience today is European or UK headquartered companies with less than 100 full-time employees, which means they are likely thinking about or have recently entered the US market. And also from my experience working with pre-Series C software businesses, often the success or failure of US market entry and expansion is directly tied to the business model expertise, as well as the go-to-market experience of the CFO within the business. So for our audience, what would be your advice when it comes to really understanding US cultural and business nuances for not only the business, but the executive leadership team?
Sure. It's interesting, because US cultural, we're so big that there's a lot of different cultures. Like, just for example, if you want to sell in Texas, a lot of that is still what we used to call the good old boy thing. You want to sell a big dollar item to somebody in Texas, you got to take them out drinking and to dinner, and a lot of times you and your wife have to take out the person and his wife or whatever. It's culturally, it's very different than in Washington D.C. They'll actually consider you unethical if you offer to take them to dinner or to a sports game or something like that. So it's like America, it's so big that there's not one culture. So I recommend to Europeans, if you have the budget and the wherewithal, do get people in your biggest markets all across the country. Don't think that Boston, Massachusetts, where I'm from, is necessarily similar to Los Angeles, California, because they are very different. It's almost like it's a different company. But one thing, Americans tend to be very welcoming to foreign countries. They just want somebody that can help them solve a business problem. So, if you've got a technology that fits the market, just go there and, invest, because it is probably the most competitive market to try to sell to. A lot of European companies do absolutely fantastic, but a lot of them struggle too, because if you're competing against American companies, a lot of us spend irrationally. It's sort of all about spending a crazy amount of money and owning the market before anyone else possibly can do it. So, I grew up, like, Amazon was the first company I ever heard of, but they were talking about, the value of a profitless corporation. And they were talking about not turning a profit for 10 to 12 years. What an idiot that guy is. He's just, that's, I remember thinking that, what are these people talking about, not turning a profit?
As in most people at the time.
Yeah. But, they were right. And a lot of people have, sort of embraced that philosophy. So, if you're going to come to America, I'd recommend learn not the culture, but the cultures, because, they are very different. And then, either make the investment or don't do it at all, if that makes sense. There's an expression, go big or go home. Don't know if you know that one, but, or weightlifters say go heavy or go home. But, if you've made the decision to go to America, recognize that it's a long-term, very expensive play, but because the market is so huge, it's one that a lot of companies find it is well worth it. So,
yeah, absolutely. I think it's, I think it sort of works both ways as well, which is that it's common for, American companies expanding to Europe and UK to think of it as one big continent and one singular market. Mm-hmm. But actually, it's UK, Ireland, Belgium, Netherlands, France, Germany, DACH, Nordics, Baltics, Eastern Europe. So, and each country and also each region has its own business culture, legal framework, accounting standards, which in the US, I guess you have the benefit of having one singular market for it. But it is really about adapting to your point, the Midwest, New York and Northeast, the South part of the US, Central California is completely different, right, from the East Coast or Boston area. So there is the need to have local networks, local business customs, and also adapting that to your marketing and sales efforts.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, a lot of Americans go in and think all Europeans are going to be the same. I mean, perhaps not so much anymore, but yeah, if you think what works in London is going to work in Munich necessarily, you might get lucky and maybe it will, but I'm not sure that I'd count on that. So, and similarly, just because Boston and San Francisco are in the same country, I wouldn't assume that, what will work in one will work in the other. But if fundamentally you've got a good product that can help solve a business problem, you can help people no matter what market they're in the United States. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the second point that you made that I heard was just investing heavily into the market. So one of the things that we advise companies we work with expanding to the US is be prepared to invest 3 to 5 million in the first, 1 to 2 years in the US market, and just double and triple salaries and compensation, because the labor market, to your point, is a lot more competitive. People are used to being sold to and picking up the phone from a cold caller, like a BDR or SDR. Mm-hmm. And that also means that you need to invest more financial resources to support that go-to-market strategy in motion.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. It's, and one example of the cultural differences is early in my sales career, I remember when I'm from Boston, so I remember calling New Yorkers, and they'd stop the phone conversation 5 minutes in. New Yorkers are known for being very direct. And they're kind of like, you're wasting my time. I don't want this product. I don't want to take up any money either. Good luck. And then, the rudest person alive. But then, like in Minneapolis, there's this expression, Minnesota nice. They're very good. They'll listen to you for 6 hours, but then they won't return your phone call and they say, I didn't want to hurt your feelings. I'd rather deal with the New Yorker personally and move on, right? But it's just such a different thing. But you're right. I mean, 3 to 5 million, is that what you said? And
I think for especially for a venture-backed business, 3 to 5 million within the first 12, 18 months.
That does make sense. And then, if you've got something that can help, Americans are going to embrace it. Technology companies, it is a little different because we do have a little bit of bias thinking our own technology is the best. It's just
everyone does.
Yeah. But, like with cars, we've sort of conceded that other countries make better cars than we do, right? But that took some time. I remember like in the 70s when one of my neighbors bought a Japanese car. It's like, why'd you buy that piece of garbage? But it was, better than the American cars that everybody else was buying. And, Germans certainly are known for making better cars than Americans are capable of. And, eventually technology, we won't have our arrogance that ours is better. But right now, a lot of people do. And, candidly, often they're right too, right? I mean, tough to compete with Silicon Valley. So.
Yeah, it is true that I think the US market has a longer history of buying out of the box software solutions compared to other geographies in the world. And so that's probably also why they're used to buying those solutions and paying, higher prices for them. But it does mean that you can get into the risk of longer sales cycles, lower conversion rates, and therefore higher need to expend and invest in opening up a new market.
Makes sense. So we get a New Yorker on the call. Yay, Alfredo. So,
hi, Alfredo.
But Boston, New York have a wonderful rivalry. It's a friendship but a rivalry at the same time. So, but being a Bostonian, we're on the losing end of it most of the time. So.
Yeah, I was a big fan of my time in New York in my early 20s, but not a place for me today.
Yeah. So you lived in the city?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I think, I encourage every young person should live in New York for a couple of years if they can. So it's a great place to be in your early 20s. So
yeah, where cities are made, or where dreams are made, rather. Sorry.
Indeed.